Step one, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step two, get some good, some food in you. Step three, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step four, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Those of you that are going to go to film school, just know you're going to have to trip balls.
Yeah,
Just
to be an artist, you got to pay
Yep.
the price.
It's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good.
All right, we're live. Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in to another podcast. I'm happy to have Josh Adams here to tell his story. But first, I wanted to say to all the dads out there, all the righteous dads, happy Father's Day. Today is Sunday. It is Father's Day today. So I'm very excited to have this man on the podcast to tell his story. I think it's going to be very inspirational, and I think we're going to get a lot from it. So I just want to say thanks, Josh, for stopping in.
Well, thank you for having me, Gunny, Brian, however you want to be known. I'm excited to share the story as well. I think it'll be good for everybody, especially individuals who are currently facing the situation. And I also want to wish everyone a happy Father's Day as well. So again, thank you for having me on.
No worries, no worries. Thanks for coming on. I know it's it's one of your children's birthday as well too, right? So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
My older boy here just turned 3 a couple days ago, and we threw a big bang for him this afternoon. So it was a good thing. It's a good day.
well, that's special. So he'll be able to look back at this too. This would be something that's etched in history, right? On YouTube and everything too. So one of the cool things that one of the reasons why I started this podcast with one of my buddies was we thought it was important to tell inspirational stories and also talk about books and things that can help people become better men, become better fathers. So this is kind of really serendipitous of like having you on Father's Day and then having your story as well, especially with some things that are coming on in the future. So I just wanted to be able to really allow you to tell your story too, and make it meaningful to like think about when your kids grow up, how, or even for me, I thought about how awesome would it be to be able to, like, my great grandpa or my grandpa had some kind of a podcast or something that video that it's almost like having a conversation with them. You know what I mean? Because we all wonder what our great grandfather was like, or grandpa, or, you know what I mean? Sometimes when we didn't have that chance. So what I like to do is, for the guests, I really like to have them talk about whatever they want to talk about, their stories, so that when their kids grow up, if they ever was wondering, hey, I want to go back in time, I want to see this podcast with my dad. And I think it's kind of something special. So I wanted you to be able to tell that story. And then also, and that gives you the ability to give some inspiration to those that are listening that might be struggling with some issues as well. In the past, we've had a lot of people to talk about multiple different things, but I think today is a really special one. So with that said, I'll let you kind of tell me a little bit about you, Josh.
Well, really simple, if you want to say that. I mean, father of 2 beautiful little boys here. I have an amazing wife. Currently reside in Colorado. Spent 6 years active duty, United States Army. Was a military police soldier stationed up in Fort Drum. That's really all there is to it, man. It's like I said, real simple, straight to the point, you know. And I agree with you 100% that my story, I think it will hold a lot of inspiration, especially for those individuals that may have access to you and to your podcast, even if they are, in a situation like, the topic we're about to discuss. That's one of the big things that you have to have is hope. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you guys who don't know, I met Josh through another organization called My Veteran Passion. You've seen him on episode 1, and you've seen the guys a couple of more times. When we went out to Denver, we had an event out there, and it was great, and got to meet Josh, and I got to sit down and have breakfast with the man. And I shared some things some personal past history stories with him, and then he started opening up and sharing with me, and it was kind of a surreal moment where you get to meet a guy that you never met, and then you guys are sharing so many things, and kind of created a friendship through talking about our adversity. And I was really inspired by the man, and I said, you know what, I got to have him tell this story. So let's take us back to, you got out of the Army after a couple of years, and you were with your wife at the time. And so you're kind of going through in some transition, and you're getting out, and kind of, let's talk about some of that stuff. Let's talk about some of kind of that time frame, I guess, would probably be a good place to start.
Well, so at the time, I wasn't with my current wife. Um, I was actually married to my ex-wife at the time. I had gotten out of the military, and like most veterans, I decided to utilize my GI Bill. I went to Universal Technical Institute and obtained a degree in automotive and diesel technology. That took me about 2 years to accomplish, or just shy of 2 years. And then from that point, I went ahead and got a job in the automotive industry. Um, Settled in with my wife, and basically just did what any good man would do: work to pay the bills and make sure his family's provided for. You know.
So UTI. So I'm familiar with the school. My brother actually graduated. He's a master mechanic too. He's doing the mechanical stuff. He was out there in Chicago. So
Okay.
I know it can be kind of hard with the mechanic side because it depends on work, right? It depends on kind of hourly wages and stuff like that. Was
Yeah.
that the case in the situation which you were in?
That's been the situation with pretty much every shop that I've ever worked at. We don't get paid. There are a few exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, it's more of a commission based type pay. Um, or in some situations where if you're working what's called flat rate, you basically get paid by the job, in a sense,
Mhm.
being each job has a book time, and that book time is what is presented to the individual purchasing the repairs or whatever. If you can get the job done in less time than book time calls for, you still make that book time. For example, a brake job will call for 2 hours, you get it done in an hour and a half, you still get paid 2 hours. But if you take longer than 2 hours, 2.5 hours, say, then you still get paid 2 hours. So along with that, instead of being paid on an hourly wage, and you're getting paid by the car and the job, um, essentially, if there are no cars coming in, you're not getting paid. So
Mhm.
yes, it more or less just depends on the workflow of the day and how many vehicles are coming in.
Can be like a like a feast or famine type of thing where you're making good
Exactly.
money at some points, and then like COVID and those things happen, and people might not be coming in as much or whatever. Like, yeah,
Exactly. And with COVID, that thing, the whole caveat to that was, I don't know how it was where you're at, but out here in Colorado, it was just an essential workers thing. Like if you had an essential job, you could go in. Being a mechanic, my job was considered essential because we still worked on ambulances, we worked on police cars, we worked on fire trucks, things like that. So, in order to keep that aspect of the economy going, I was classified as an essential worker. But on the flip side of that, because nobody was allowed to go to work, there was really no foot traffic coming into the shop. So, it was kind of a double edged sword.
yeah, I can see that kind of happening. Yeah, I mean, I'm still in the military, so it was a little easier for me during COVID because, they just told us to work from home. A lot of the things, the job that I had at the time was something I could stay home and do in the office.
Okay.
And actually, a lot of them over there in Virginia, when I was at the Defense Logistics Agency, they're still not back to work, I don't think. So I
Right.
think things have kind of changed for some of the people. Some jobs weren't so physical, hands on, and were able to kind of shift from that brick and mortar spot where people were doing services to, teleworking and things like that. So I think a lot of
Right.
people were really affected by it. And And that kind of brings us to the topic of discussion is falling through the hard times, financial situations, and something that, me and you have discussed and looked in the future is how do we help veterans with, potential homelessness, potential financial struggles. I mean, I've talked to MVP about depression and mental health, but I think it comes down to you can't really have good mental health if you don't have, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have a house and safety and food and security, especially for a family.
Right.
Mental health becomes kind of something on the back burner.
Well, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Danny. I didn't mean
No, I
to
was
interrupt.
passing it to you, man. Anyway, so
Oh, okay. Well, what I was going to say is a lot of us veterans kind of already struggle with mental health, just like you just mentioned. But when it comes down to ending up in a situation where you're potentially not faced with, where you're faced with potentially not having income and things get harder, that only makes that struggle that much more difficult, you know?
so when you were kind of struggling, tell me about like how easy was it for you as a veteran that came out with transition readiness seminars and some of the briefings that we go through. I'm going to be going through that in here in a year.
Uh,
So I don't know. I haven't been through the TRS classes yet, but I'd imagine that some of them are kind of quick. I did some of the pre TRS classes, and it was kind of get you in, get you out. But what was
uh,
crazy to me, it was me and maybe one other person that had 20 years that was actually going to pull a pension or retirement. And everybody
uh,
else was like really young kids. And I can't
uh,
imagine for them to try to navigate the complexity of the resources and some of the things to like find help. And I know we were discussing some of those resources with the VA earlier,
uh.
not really being that easy and not really willing to help. Did you get a lot of like a lot of assistance from VA and some of those resources? Did you feel that TRS was beneficial?
No, I didn't. Because, it doesn't matter whether you spend, 2 years in the military or 20 years in the military, that I'm sure that anybody who has lived that active duty life, you know, knows and understands that when you're in, the military is not just a job, it becomes a way of life.
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, even having been out since 2014, I still struggle on the daily with having to remind myself, I'm no longer in the military. So when I go to work, I have to be mindful of the way that I address communication with my coworkers or my subordinates, if you want to call them that at this point, because I can come across, with that whole mindset of we're at work, we're on mission mode, we need to get things done. There's no time to stand around and talk, especially like we discussed with the vehicles coming in and out and that workload being there. You need to turn that wrench as fast as you can in order to get that vehicle out to get the next one in. Ultimately, speed is your best friend.
Yeah.
So, with that having been said, being in that military mindset, it's just like anything else in life. They can try to give you the tools for facing the civilian reality, but ultimately it just comes with time. Some people, I guess, it's easier for others. Um, but in my situation, I don't feel like the class was helpful at all. And the transition training was very unhelpful because, again, you spend 6 years in the military, they give you a 2 week crash course on how to, you
Take
know,
care of yourself afterwards. Yeah.
demilitarize yourself and how to get along with people and how to get ready for um, those jobs and situations that may arise when you get out. But it doesn't make it any easier. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I think I can kind of see where you're coming from. And what I'm hearing is kind of, in the military, time is money. And especially as a mechanic, you have to get those cars in and out, get the jobs done because that's more potential for your paycheck. So with the
Right.
complexity of everything with the resources, you don't have time to sit there and read a bunch of stuff and study things and try to apply for different resources or whatever you can do to kind of help. And, it doesn't even mean it's pretty much everything that's happening in America. Rent is getting higher and higher. The houses, the APR, the, annual percentage rates are going higher. People are kind of, in the middleman is kind of getting pushed out to poverty. You know what I mean? And this is kind of what's sad about it. And people, I think, when they get out of the service, I think they think they're going to be okay just because they were in the service. You know what I mean? And everything's going to be fine. But once you're out, you're out. It's no longer, hey, I give a shit about you anymore because you're just another person, right? So
exactly, dude. You don't have that guaranteed, steady paycheck like you did every 2 weeks in the military.
mm-hmm.
Everything out here is it's much different. It's much different, and honestly, that's why when I got out of the military, and I had access to my GI Bill, I really took time and consideration into what I was going to be doing. And my thought process at the time was there are three things in this world that are never going anywhere as long as I'm alive. That would be medicine, computers, and the automobile. So the best way to go about utilizing my GI Bill and my thought was to pick one of those three categories and run with it because it would guarantee me a job all the way across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And that has held true for, ever since 2016. I can apply for a job anywhere and get a job anywhere, but that's because I was smart about what I did,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
So you were always in Colorado, then you came right back to Colorado, and was finding work there in 2016, or is that when kind of you fell on hard times?
No, so ultimately, kind of the backstory was I got out of the Army in 2014, and I immediately started my enrollment into school while I was on my terminal leave. So by the time my terminal leave was up, I was already enrolled in school, so I was already collecting my BAH and stuff. By the time my terminal leave started, within the first month of starting school, I already had my BAH coming in. I
Mm.
was working part time as a delivery driver for a paint store to kind of subsidize, or I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but
Subsidized. Got it.
yeah, to kind of cover that lap in income and to make sure that my child support was paid as well,
Mm.
so that I could pay my child support and then my BAH was going straight to my bills. So I didn't start to fall on hard times until roughly about 2019, early 2000. Oh,
20.
I would say, when did I move here? Yeah, early 2019. So I was in Arizona. I went through UTI. I started working, and then right around February of 2019 was when everything kind of started. So and then I moved up here to Colorado, beginning of March 19, around about the second week or so, and I've been up here ever since.
All right. And then once COVID kind of hit, that's when shit really started spiraling downhill as far as.
No, so actually, I was homeless to begin with when I moved here to Colorado.
Gotcha.
Okay, so the way that happened was when I was living in Phoenix, I had some roommates that were less than responsible, if that's the best way, nicest way I can think to put it. So I was living in an apartment complex, and my roommates weren't doing their share essentially to help pay the bills. Okay. So throughout the course of the time that I was living there, I ended up selling guitars and other equipment and other things to kind of make sure that I had money coming in to cover my expenses. Well, one day in February, I came home from work and there was an eviction notice on my door. Even though I had tried to keep in communication with the leasing office, like I know rent is late. I will have it by the third week of the month. Just tell me what's needed and I'll make sure you get it. So rather than getting back to me with an email and responding to me with, hey, this is what's going on, this is how much you owe us, I came home from work, there was an eviction notice on my door, And then so I went to my downstairs neighbor in hopes of talking to him, just kind of like, hey man, like this just happened. I wasn't asking for a handout or anything, just to talk.
Hmm.
And he essentially said, hey, you've got nothing to worry about. You can crash on my couch for, as long as you need to get things rolling for you. And round about that time, shortly before that is when I started talking to my wife now, because I'd met her online. And ultimately, I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. I wasn't making enough money to get a new apartment, any of those things. So ultimately, I took a chance and I rented a car. I packed my dogs and my clothes and whatever else I could fit into that vehicle. And I drove to Colorado to be with my girlfriend, now my wife. Um, she was living in a less than ideal situation with her roommates. So she moved out of her place and came to live with me. And for about a year and a half after that, we were living in the vehicle because neither one of us had a place to live. We were both working at the time, but it still wasn't enough to get us where we needed to be. So when I got out here, I had a job. Within a week of moving out here at a local tire shop, they weren't paying me anything. They were paying me like $13 an hour. I managed to stay there for about 9 months. Um, and then I just figured out, despite trying and trying and trying, and her having a job as well, that $13 an hour wasn't enough. So then I went on to another job for a job offer of $16 an hour. So that's basically how I ended up where I was at, and that kind of falls back into play with the whole automotive field, whether it be busting tires or whatever. I wasn't lacking for a job at any point in time. So despite working and trying, like I said, it just wasn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finally, I think later on, like you were trying to get resources, you're trying to get assistance through the VA.
Uh-huh.
And I remember the story you were telling me. You said you went into the
Yeah.
VA office, right?
So with the whole VA thing, the lesson that I've learned with them is they have a system in place to prevent veteran homelessness. Okay, meaning that if you're in jeopardy of losing,
So what do they consider homelessness, though?
actually being out on the street,
Like literally on the ground, laying there, fucking not in a
and just
house, not
just
in, you know
not
what I mean?
just not having a roof over your head, essentially, yes.
Okay, because I
So
know the government. I think the main thing that we need to know for the people that are listening and watching this is homelessness is defined as not having a permanent residence. So even if you're
uh
like couch surfing and shit and going to friends' houses and living in
yeah,
your
you
car,
have a
you're homeless, man.
yes.
You don't have a
Well,
residence.
they don't consider that homeless.
They don't
Okay,
consider VA doesn't
they,
consider
they
it.
don't they don't consider that couch surfing thing as a homeless situation, from my understanding. I can't say 100% sure, but I can tell you from my experiences with the VA that when you are homeless, it's damn near impossible to get anything going for you for help. Because when I spoke to them, even when I was struggling with my roommates and I went to the VA, they basically said, we can really only help you if you're in jeopardy of losing your home. You see what I'm saying? So if you're already out there, there's not much they're going to do to help you. If you're struggling and you're in jeopardy of losing your home, that's when they'll kick it into gear and try to offer assistance. But even then, it's very limited. And I don't believe that I would have qualified for anything at that point. And by the time I would have come to a point where I needed the help, I feel like it would have been too late anyway. Because they look at it like if you're in jeopardy of losing your home, you can't pay your rent, you get in touch with them, you fill out the paperwork you need to fill out, and then, just like everything
It's a
else in the
lottery
government,
system or something, or
what's that?
kind of a lottery system. Like they might help you or they might not, or
Kind of,
where are you
yeah.
going to be in?
So basically, it's like by the time the paperwork and stuff is already processed, at that point,
You're already out on the street.
it's
Okay.
too late because it takes months. It takes months. It's not like a you call them and say, "Hey, I'm getting kicked out of my home because I don't have my rent." Well, you gotta go through
Yeah, I would
processes.
imagine. I mean, I would imagine they're probably overburdened with so many different applications and so many like course like you know workers that are working with potential people that have issues. You know what I mean? They're like
Yeah,
that. They're just kind of
they have
overburdened. So
yeah they have a lot going on, and they deal with a lot of different scenarios of, at the VA. But by this point, to be 100% honest with you, I had given up hope in the VA anyway because of dealing with them for other purposes, like the pain in my shoulder. I went to the VA and I was talking to the doctor, and he had the audacity to tell me, I don't think you're in as much pain as you say you are because I have an issue similar to that and it's nothing
mm,
like that. And it's like, okay, well, great, dude. Like, I understand you're a doctor and different things affect different people in different ways, but that doesn't mean that I'm not in the pain that I'm saying I'm in. So, thank you. Have a nice day. So, at that point, I was like, well, I can't even get the help that I need through the VA for an actual physical condition. So what good is it going to do me to attempt to go to them to try to resolve a situation where I might end up in the streets? I had already lost faith and confidence in the VA because of that.
yeah,
If that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're kind of going through a spiral of losing faith in a lot of people. I mean, you leave the army, you leave the brotherhood, then you go out there thinking that people are going to care and take care of you, and you're going through hard times, and they're kind of resisting you or telling you to suck it up in a way where it's really just pushing people away, probably because you know their their caseload is so high. They're just saying whatever they want. Maybe they're thinking about, other people are saying, hey, I'm hurt here because I want medications or whatever else. I'm sure there's a lot of different things that people are kind of situations that are unique, that the human being is the one that basically has to pick and choose at the VA office whether or not to help somebody. I think is kind of a shitty situation for everybody.
And
Um,
that's kind of where I feel it's at right now, man. To be honest with you, is I feel like, like a conversation that we've had before, you and I personally, I feel like that the VA was put there in place to make the government, you know, look better in the eyes of the public. Like I had mentioned to you before, we send these people off to a meat factory and then they come back and they're all messed up and now they're roaming the streets, they're losing their minds and killing people, they're
yeah.
alcohol and drug problems, they're menace to society, you need to do something. So the government put this up, I think, in order to hush the general population, because my personal life and my personal experiences with the VA have been absolutely less than ideal, you
Yeah.
know. And unfortunately, fortunately but unfortunately, there's a nonprofit organization that I go to for my mental health needs, because again, I don't like the VA. I don't trust them. I don't
Hmm.
I don't want anything to do with them because they essentially medicate you and they don't help you resolve the issues. That's my experience. And the lady that I go to counseling with at this not for profit organization has told me that she has heard this same story countless numbers of times from countless other veterans, that the VA is an absolute joke, and that every veteran that she's spoken to would much rather go to this nonprofit
Hmm.
rather than step foot into another VA building.
So that nonprofit's there in Colorado, local to you that you're utilizing. Do you want to give them
Yes,
a
it's
shout out or?
absolutely. The veterans not for profit organization is called Mount Carmel, and they offer a wide range of services, everything from mental health counseling to helping you pay your rent. Granted, the rental assistance is a one-time thing because they don't want you to become dependent on it. They want you to get up and function, which is fair and reasonable. I get it, but they offer mental health. They offer rental assistance if you can't pay your bills. Um, that's the organization that I went to when I had actually moved up here to Colorado after being homeless for about a year or so. I went to work at a dealership out here, a Ford dealership, And they're the ones that actually founded the not-for-profit organization. And one day when I was walking through the halls, I saw this banner that basically said, "Help us help our veterans," and it mentioned Mount Carmel by name. And so at that point, I thought to myself, well, I'm a veteran and I'm working for the company that founded
Right.
this place.
Yeah.
Why would they not help me? So I went in and sat down and spoke to a caseworker over there and explained to them at the time that, my wife was pregnant, we were living in our car, and no further questions were asked. I submitted my paperwork to him with proof of income because, like I said, I was working at the time. I wasn't,
Hmm.
out there begging for money or doing drugs or whatever else. I was trying to actively dig myself back out of this along with my wife, who, despite being pregnant, was also working every day. So we went in there, submitted our pay stubs, our proof of income, the doctor's reports that she was pregnant and that we were expecting, and all of these other things. The gentleman that was helping us, I believe his name was Phil Thomas. Big shout out to him. He was amazing. Phil, if you're watching this, man, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Um, but yeah, he was an amazing individual. And he said that he didn't want us to have to worry about the potential stress of losing our child
Yeah.
or
Right.
any of the other things that come with being homeless and having kids.
Hmm.
So he did push us to the top of the wait list. And fortunately, um, about a month before my son was born, he put us into a hotel while he waited for our application for the apartment to be processed and get all that paperwork finalized. Then he got us moved into the place. He paid for our security deposit. The only thing that I had to pay was the pet deposit and the pet rent. But for the first 6 months, he paid our rent from August all the way up to like mid-January before he
Wow.
handed everything over. And even during this time, like Christmas would come around and he'd give me a call and say, "Hey, where you at right now?" And I would tell him I'm at work. And he'd go, "I'll be over there in 20 minutes. I have a Thanksgiving or a Christmas package for you and your family." And it would entail stuffing and a turkey and all the stuff to go with it, and it was absolutely just mind blowing that
Beautiful,
this
man.
was there and available. And even though I was trying, and I told him from the beginning when I sat down with him, I said, "Look, man, I don't need you to carry me. I don't need you to take care of me. I don't need anything more from you than to just help me get into a place, and I will carry it from there." But because I was one of the few people that went in there and already had a job, and I was actively engaged in trying and willing to dig myself out of this, he proceeded, again, like I said, to pay my first month's rent all the way up through the 6th month. He put down my security deposit, the whole 9 yards, and just the whole time was absolutely there with us the entire step of the way. And I sent him a text message actually a few weeks ago saying, "Hey, man, like I appreciate everything you've done for us. Just a heads up, I've moved on to a better position. I'm making better money. Um, I have another child. We're in a better house.
Hmm.
And none of this, I don't think could have been accomplished without you and Mount Carmel. So yes, absolute big, big, huge shout out to Mount Carmel and everybody that works there. Absolutely amazing place.
That's fucking awesome. That's an amazing story, and that's so inspirational. And like, it reminds me of Tony Robbins. I don't know if you're familiar with who Tony Robbins is. He's an author, a motivational speaker, and shit. He's a massive billionaire now, but he has
Mm,
kind of a similar story when he was younger that I kind of wanted to share too, because it's those acts of kindness that change people's lives. You know what I mean? That really do, and it's something that's so beautiful and so wonderful. But I mean, I think there's a lot of times where people feel like they're taken advantage of, but there's those key moments, and it sounds like that was one of the moments for you. And Tony had the same thing when he was a young child, and his family was struggling to Christmas, Thanksgiving, having even food on the table, and his dad
mm,
was super prideful. I mean, they had a house and everything, but he tells this story, and this is kind of his beginning, his beginning story. Uh, he talks about having growing up in that kind of situation where the dad worked hard, but just they could never make ends meet. And one day there was a guy that knocked on his door, and he comes to the door, and there's a man standing there with a big bag of groceries. And he's like, "Hey, is your dad here?" And Tony's like, "Yeah, give me a second." And he goes and gets his dad, and his dad comes out to the door, kind of huffing and puffing, like, "What the hell are you doing? We don't want
Right.
you don't want your charity. Like, get the hell out of here." And the guy says, "This is from a unanimous donor. It's not from me. It's from the church or whatever, whoever was." And he said, "We don't even know who gave it to." And he says, "I don't need it." And he's tried to slam the door in the guy's face, and the guy put his foot in the door that stopped it. And Tony said he remembers seeing the door. He's seen his dad's face get really bright red, like he's ready to attack. And the guy at the door says, "Look, man, don't let your pride keep your family from eating today." You know what I mean? And he's seen his dad get real flush red, ready to attack. And then a moment of relaxation came over his dad, and he took the bag and he slammed the door. But Tony remembers seeing that as a child, and they had Thanksgiving dinner. And you remember seeing that, and he couldn't wait to go work, to go, pay back the kindness that stranger, it's just a stranger, came to the door, right? Maybe he was just delivering it. Maybe it was somebody else that didn't even, they didn't want their name to be on that. They didn't want to be known, but it was that act of kindness that really meant everything. And Tony since then has given, I think, a few million meals a year. And I think they're going to try to get like 1 billion. So the guys since then, so the story of him, he started working as a teenager, and then he remembers the first gift package that he was able to buy. And he did the same thing to a family when he was 17. And since then he's created an organization, a nonprofit organization, and multiple organizations, and, became a mentee to Jim Rohn, who is one of the big motivational speakers, to Napoleon Hill and to Dale Carnegie and all those guys. So like, he's done massive amounts of business and massive amounts of philanthropy to help everybody else. And I think that story right there, that man from Carmel Mountain, because Carmel is that they do a school out there too, right? Do they have like a alternative learning center or a school out there?
So they do all kinds of stuff, man. Like I don't think they necessarily have a school per se, but they do have information there. Like if you're looking for a job, for example, and you have an interview lined up, you can go into Mount Carmel and tell them, and they'll give you a business suit to wear if you need it to go to your interview, and then you just take it back when you're done. They also have, as soon as you walk in the door, they have pamphlets stacked up from one end of the wall to the other, where they have like mental health pamphlets, and they have, if you need vocational training, how to get that. If you're looking to further your education, they tell you how to do that.
I'm pretty sure it's the same organization. When I was out there on recruiting duty, there was a alternative learning center, because I graduated from an alternative learning center.
Maybe
I had to
they
put
do.
those kids in, but I had to get them vetted through their educational stuff. I had to get them vetted through a process, but it was kind of like those kids were on their last chance. Some of the kids that had a hard time, had some family issues, and just like me, what just happened? Okay, something that just blacked out for a second. Did you lose me for a second?
No, man, I got you loud and clear.
Okay, cool. Something just disconnected on my end. But yeah, so I remember going in there, and they seemed like they had an awesome alternative learning center program that was there. So I wonder if it's the same, because it's past Rifle, right?
I'm sorry?
Is it right by Rifle, Colorado?
No, it's smack dab in the heart of Colorado Springs.
Okay.
I was trying to avoid saying that, but now everybody knows I live in Colorado Springs.
No, it's all good.
But at the end of the day, I don't know if they have a vocational school. I'm not aware of if they offer offsite training. They very well may. I don't know, because I've never had to utilize that. I can definitely find out more information for you next time I'm there.
I was just curious, man. I was just curious because it sounds like it's kind of maybe the same organization that's spread around. you don't got to worry about anybody on your knowing your location, because I'm no Joe Rogan. It's not like there's going to be hundreds of millions of
Right.
people, but
Well, it's
maybe
fine. I mean, even if they do know, it's not like they know exactly where I live. But
yeah,
I will find out more information because I go to Mount Carmel every Thursday for my behavioral health counseling. Um, so next time I go, which will be this coming Thursday, I will ask my
yeah,
counselor if she knows
I'm
if there's
curious.
any sort of like vocational training or if they offer it or where. And I'll definitely get it back to you because I feel like, especially if there are veterans here in Colorado and Colorado Springs. I mean, it doesn't matter if you live in Grand Junction or
Hmm.
Boulder or wherever you live. I feel like that this particular organization would be worth the travel if you can make it down here, you know, because they, like, for example, my counseling, if for some reason, I'm not feeling up to the drive out there because I'm, sick or I'm just having a day where I don't want to leave the house,
Hmm.
or any of those things, I can text my counselor and say, hey, look, I'm not feeling like coming to the building today, or I've got too much going on right now today, or whatever. Um, and she'll send me a link for a Zoom meeting, and I can do my counseling virtually if I need to. So they're very receptive, and they're very much there to help you in any way, shape, or form that they can. And I've actually seen situations where there'll be homeless vets just kicking it there in the lobby, eating a snack because they walked in off the streets. It's raining outside, and you can tell
Yeah.
they're homeless because their clothes are all messed up. They've got their backpack or their cart or whatever they're using. And these people in Mount Carmel will come over and offer them a sandwich and some chips and some hot coffee or something. And
Yeah.
they're welcome to just sit in the lobby and eat their food and do whatever they're doing.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
It really,
We
it
talked
really
about,
is.
and the reason why we really talked about this was, moving forward and looking to the future on how we can help vets. And I think it's great for, your story of being through that and building up that resiliency and going through that struggle and how it feels, because
Uh-huh.
I think, having you as part of it, when these guys want someone to talk to, man, you've been through it. And I think the biggest thing is the service to others. I think that's just, I know it is part of the AA, like the 12-step process, I think is like the last step is like helping somebody else. And I think service to others it just gives the most reward. And, money doesn't mean shit, but
Well,
acts of kindness and servicing and helping other people, I think, I think it's the most selfish thing you do because it makes you feel the best. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
and hearing those stories, just hearing what it meant to you of, is it a big deal to pay 6 months and do what they did? Yes. But in the grand scheme of things, of what it's doing and helping the lives of everybody and your family and your kids, sometimes people just need a leg up. There's some shitty things that happen. And one of the books that I'm reading now is called Prepared.
Okay.
And it's by Mike Glover, and he talks about catastrophes, and he talks about the stresses and when things happen. And he talks about war, and when you're going through different things. And there's a thing called the Yerker, what is it, the Yerker domain, let me get the right
Okay.
stress thing. It's the Yerkes Dodson law, where it talks about how people freeze up in certain situations, or they break down, or they give up hope. And it really
Uh-huh.
has to do with a couple of different things. And one is complexity, severity, and exposure. So like the more we're exposed to it, the more resilient we can be. But there's going to be different situations that happen in our lives. And when you talk about hope, or you talk about, the courage and the ability to overcome those stresses,
Uh-huh.
that whole the Yerkes Dodson principle is all about when people freeze. If there's too much stress, and they're not trained in that type of situation, that people
Uh-huh.
freeze, or they just stop caring. Um, and I think you've built up a lot of resiliency through your military training, maybe through some of your upbringing as a child. I know I have. Not saying
Right.
my life was like super difficult, but um, I grew up with a mom that got into drugs, and my brother got into issues and stuff like that too. And I'm still,
Uh-huh.
some of my family members are still dealing with things. Thankfully, some of them are dealing with those situations, but when you grow up with somebody that's dependent on meth or other things, plus having mental health issues, I think you become more resilient to certain situations. But you
Yeah.
also understand that anything can happen to anybody at any given time. It
Oh
only takes a
yeah.
couple of
Absolutely.
catastrophic events, a sickness, an accident, so you can't work anymore, and the things that you save for a rainy day, but that's only going to last so long. Your
Right.
friends are going to only be there so much, and they can only be there so much. So to
Right.
think that this can't happen to any American,
It
uh,
can happen at any time to anybody, man, and I'm walking proof of that. Like I was
mhm,
working every day. I wasn't doing stupid things. Life just threw me a curveball, and I had no choice but to run with it, man. And ultimately, like when you're talking about hope, um, one of the biggest things is, when you go to, you know, a church or whatever, you take that first step and they give you this piece of paper that has all of these organizations on it. And being homeless is already, it doesn't seem like there's a light at the end of the tunnel to begin with. And then, like I said, you're already struggling with whatever mental health issues you have, and that just compounds it. So you're given this piece of paper with all these different charities and these organizations on them for you to call, and then you make these appointments and you go there, and then gradually, slowly by slowly, so gradually, little by little, you slowly start to lose whatever hope you had when you walked in that door, because this person will tell you no, you're making too much money, even though you're homeless and you're working and trying,
mhm,
you're making more money than you technically should be to qualify for their assistance. So they tell you no. So you lose that little bit of hope. Then you go to the next person, and then they tell you the same thing. Then you go to the next person, and this whole time you're slowly losing a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more of that hope until you do get to that point where you're absolutely hopeless. And my wife and I, honestly, we felt like we were at the very last end of the rope. Like, where do we go now?
mhm.
Because, like we discussed, living in your car isn't cheap. You have to go to the laundromat to wash your clothes. You have to eat out every day.
Yeah,
You don't
it's
have the
way more
money to
expensive yeah.
store your food. When it gets cold, you have to run the car at night to stay warm. When it gets hot, you have to run the AC to stay cold, and all
Yeah.
of those things cost gas. So ultimately, it's a catch 22, because even though you're working and trying to get yourself out of it, you're still spending all this money every day just to survive.
Mhm.
And then part of my situation too, we were talking about hope, was it was not by any stretch of the means a healthy coping mechanism, but I was drinking to try to maintain some level of hope, and that wasn't helping the situation financially, but it was the only way that I knew to get by.
Yep.
Because here I went from working and having a roof over my head and being on top of the world, and
It's
all
the
of a sudden
stress every second of the
that
day you're
rug,
thinking of shit, man.
yeah, so that rug just got ripped right out from
Yeah.
underneath my feet. And, like I said, I got that piece of paper with all these people that kept telling me no, 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 no. And ultimately, I think that's where people end up giving up hope, because they feel like they've reached the last of their resources. Nobody's willing to give them that hand. And I honestly feel like, had it not been for God or whoever was there with me at the time saying, quit busting tires and go to work at this place,
Yeah.
I never would have found Mount Carmel, and I never would have gotten the help that I needed. So I feel like nonprofit organizations are the way to go, because, prime example, even when I lost my job in January, I was laid off, and I received a referral to Catholic Charities, I guess is what it's called. It's an organization out here in Colorado that helps with families that need their rent paid, that need their utilities paid, or whatever in emergency. So you have to submit an email to these people explaining why you need their help, what you're doing to make it better, what financial assistance you need, And you have to submit this email between the 1st and I think the 7th of the month, because after the 7th, they stop taking those emails and they start cutting checks. Well, with this even being a church, when I lost my job and I reached out to them, I never even heard back. Versus when I went into Mount Carmel, I got in right away. I filled out my paperwork, and it took some time, but during this time, I was in touch with my leasing office, explaining to them what was going on. Like, I'm working on it. Please don't throw me out. They worked with me. About 3 weeks after I lost my job, Mount Carmel came through, and they said, we'll pay half of your rent, but you need to get this other organization. I can't remember the name of it, but I will look it up and I'll let you know that as well. They're also here in Colorado. They said, you need to get these people to pay the other half of your rent, also a not-for-profit organization. So I sent them the information. I got a hold of a counselor or with a social worker about a week after I started dealing with them. They got a hold of me, said this is what we need. I gave them the paperwork. Within 3 days, they contacted me back, said you're approved. They linked up with Mount Carmel, and my rent was paid for the month of January. So again, these not-for-profit organizations are absolutely outstanding. Like, I have more faith and hope in them than I do any other place that I've had to deal with in my entire life.
And that kind of is everything for looking to the future. We discussed about starting a nonprofit to do the same thing, to help vets, not just vets that are out on the streets, but those that really need the help, that are in the situation, whether it's a broken appliance, a heater, whatever, and a refrigerator that goes out. I mean, there's going to be people that are going to go through tough times. So, and one of the things I wanted to also push on this podcast too is for the ability for them and people that are watching this to be able to donate to some of these nonprofits and give those gifts out there, because this is where it goes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we don't have the nonprofit ourselves started out yet, but there's some things in the works that we're talking about doing. And but until then, reach out to Mount Carmel, reach out to the other one. I'll try to put that link in the description for this YouTube video, because this is what we have to do. If you have the ability to give back and you have the ability to donate or do so, or if you have the ability and you want to get rid of some appliances and stuff. I know there's a lot of different organizations that take in-kind donations that actually provide this to people in need as well. Some of the ideas that we were having is going out there and finding those people in the streets and the resources. Because I know, looking up statistics, there's shelters and stuff that people go to, but the unfortunate thing is a lot of the homeless people are young children, because it's single moms, you know what I mean?
Yep.
With kids.
True.
And that's kind of sad, because what kind of situation and what kind of PTSD and issues are those kids going to have? That how do they think the universe cares about them? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because we can't be indifferent to the situation. I mean, we're all human beings, and everybody deserves a place to be safe.
I agree with that 100%, because young minds are very impressionable.
Yep, especially at that
And
age.
if they get put into that situation and they keep getting told no and no, not necessarily them, straightforwardly, but their parents do, and their parents can't get the help, what kind of viewpoint is that going to put on them in the world? Nobody else helped me, so why should I bother helping anybody else?
Yeah. Yep.
But
They're going to be
I'm
super indifferent. Yeah. That one saying I kind of shared with you, man, is, love's not, hate's not the opposite of love. It's indifference.
Exactly.
Indifference is
Yep.
the opposite of love.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And also, I was going to say also, in reference to this, I will create another email address and kick that over to you, just specifically for this,
Okay.
so that if anybody needs to get a hold of me for any reason, if they need help navigating through the system, or need references or referrals to other places, or anything that I can do to give you a hand as far as that goes, reach out and I'll do what I can, because I've had to navigate the system and it is not easy, and it will definitely be one of those situations where if you go in with a little bit of hope, it gets destroyed in a very short period of time. And without knowing where to go, who to talk to, or where to reach out, ultimately that's why people give up because they feel like they've run out of options. And I can tell you firsthand that that's not the case. And unfortunately, a lot of these not for profit organizations are independently run. So they're not going to be on that piece of paper that gets handed out when you go to, you know, whatever state building you go to. They're going to give you the ones that are going to benefit them so that they can put you in the system and make sure they're getting their grant
And
money for the year and vice and whatever. So I'll make sure to create another email account just to give to you so you can post it up on a podcast. And anybody that needs help or knows somebody that needs help, if they need to navigate it, feel free to reach out and I will do the best that I can to help you get through whatever it is that you're facing because it wasn't easy for me and I know it's not going to be easy for them either.
that's that's beautiful, man. That you're the light over there. You know what I mean? That comes from the darkness. That you can be the light over there in Colorado, and I have some people over there too that I want to get you in contact with. That's kind of got the same mindset. That's trying to help over there on the Western Slope over by Grand Junction. But I think that's huge because, especially with the vets, man, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable working with a vet that's been through it, that knows kind of the ropes and kind of can do this. So this is something that can grow from 1 to 2 to 3 to, exponential growth. It can turn into a lot in a movement. And I think it's amazing. And I know that your kids are going to be proud to watch this and say, yeah, my dad was helping those vets and helping other people. Because that's the fisher of men, man. You're going to help those guys and so that they don't give up hope. And I think that's beautiful. And I just appreciate you telling your story, putting out your inspiration. And I look forward to, trying to make a change in the world for the future for the vets that are struggling through the same situations, man.
I'm definitely here with you on that, and it's ironic, in a way that this is happening the way that it is with you, and having met up with you and all of these other things. Because I was talking to my wife about it, a couple of days ago after our phone call when we were on the phone for I think what 2 hours or
Two and a
something.
half hours. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
the third podcast. It just wasn't recorded.
So yeah, well, it was funny because I was talking to my wife about it, and it was weird because I told her I said, I can't for the life of me understand how or why I ended up in that situation. And then after our conversation on the phone the other day, it hit me that maybe this is why. Maybe that's why this happened so that I could be a part of, the No Lone Wolves and try to be there to help other people. And that's the only logical explanation for it, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
For me to be able to share my experience and to try to be able to help other people that maybe can't find the right venues or avenues to try to get out of it. And maybe that's what my purpose is now.
It's definitely your purpose. I mean, it's all set up, you know what I mean? And, not to speak too much about religion, but I am a Christian man and I believe everything is for the reason. And sometimes we have to go through the shit in order to be able to be the ones that can help. And unfortunately that's the case, you know what I mean? And I think that's why Righteous Dad was something that I wanted to create with one of my buddies over there in Virginia. And we just, our friendship started where we would talk about books and talk about personal growth and talk about how to help people and just become better men and better dads. And then it kind of just started stacking layers on it with, some of the other books that we're reading, Intentional Father, and some of the book club ideas that we're going to have. And basically our biggest mission with this podcast is to tell stories, all kinds of stories, maybe be the poor man, Joe Rogan, but have people in all walks of life when they're in the grind, when they're actually about to break that next level to do whatever they're going to do. And I think for you, Josh, I think this is a very big moment. It's Father's Day. And I think it's therapeutic for you too. And especially when we start to push this stuff, it might not be easy. There might be issues where we get burned by people, but if we can just help one person get a leg up and then they help another person, and it's just a ripple effect, man. And that's being the light of the earth. That's being the salt of the earth, bringing flavor, having these connections. And even if it's not money or helping people pay the rent, bro, people need to be reached out. You need to reach out to your brothers and sisters, those that you served with. You need to continue to have those relationships. And I think that's a big part that MVP is doing a good job on, is helping people stay together and deal with mental health. But with No Lone Wolves and some of the things that we're thinking in the future is we want to be that physical boot on the ground that comes out there and maybe helps walk them or brings them to their appointment or figures out some way, if we have the financial means, to pay their rent and do the things that they did for Josh. So if you guys are listening to this still, I thank you for that. You could be doing anything else. Please, if you have extra few dollars in your pocket, reach out to Mount Carmel, reach out to some of these nonprofits in your community, or try to be a member of those nonprofits. Try to help, try to reach out and maybe contact me. If you want to be a part of No Lone Wolves, if you're a military member and you want to get some volunteer hours and things like that, that'd be great. Because we're going to start a movement here, and it starts here with Josh Adams. So I appreciate you, Josh, for coming out. Appreciate for your time. Again, happy Father's Day. I'm proud to call you my friend now. I'm proud to call you a brother in the service. And I want you to go and spend some time with your kids now, because I know it's late over there. And again, thank you very much for everything that you've done for the country and that you're still doing to this day and that you're going to do in the future. So you guys, before we go, just don't give up hope, man. Keep on fighting. You know, it's right around the corner. Just keep on a little bit. You know, it's never too late to call out to a buddy. If you're having an issue with mental health or thinking about hurting yourself or suicide, just don't give up hope, man. And just continue to fight. And for all those dads out there that are continuing to stay righteous, this is what it's all about. And be strong men and help each other out. So again, that was pretty much the story of today, is hope. So I thank you again, Josh. And we'll meet up again and have another podcast here, probably a month or two down the road. So I thanks again. So you guys, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay righteous.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding from the words I spit. So sharp, so freezing, so cold. Behold, frostbite they feeling. I could tear you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste and my mind starts peeling. I don't pace myself, I grind on kneeling. Got lust for change, I just love the feeling. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. And I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. Cause I'ma live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I don't lie at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time and I'll soon be winning. I live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I don't lie at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time and I'll soon be winning. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight.